David Stearns and Steve Cohen went out to Japan to meet with Yoshinobu Yamamoto personally last week. I'll break down all the latest in the Yamamoto sweepstakes, and I'll also discuss everything that took place in the Rule 5 draft on the latest edition. Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. I also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Well, I thought we'd be doing a lot of live shows this week because of the winter meetings, and the opportunity hasn't presented itself much, so I wanted to take the time today to hop live to talk about the Rule 5 draft, which we'll get to in the next segment, and all of the latest buzz surrounding Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Last week, according to reports, Steve Cohen and David Stearns flew out to Japan to meet Yoshinobu Yamamoto personally. They met his family, had a nice dinner. The meeting went well. That does not mean the Mets are absolutely going to sign Yoshinobu Yamamoto, but what it does mean is they are absolutely all in on this guy, and we knew that. But to take it to this extent, that's not something that I think any other team did last week. The process was sort of outlined probably about a week to 10 days ago at this point, where they said Yamamoto is going to take preliminary meetings via Zoom. He is going to wait out the winter meetings, then come back to the United States and meet with all the finalists. Well, the Mets took it into their own hands. They said, you know what? As much as Zoom is nice, we're going to fly out to meet you personally. And that is the little touch that could mean a big difference when it comes to his ultimate decision. The Mets are up against it. There are a lot of teams interested in Yoshinobu Yamamoto, but they have a couple of aces in their back pocket when it comes to getting this guy to sign. The biggest one is pretty simple. They're going to submit the biggest offer on him. Steve Cohen, he gets what he wants most times because he can invest the money to do it. That's why he was able to get Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, because he went out and paid top dollar. I think the same thing's going to happen here. And on tomorrow's show, I want to really think about how crazy that bidding can get and what might be too far. Is there any point that's too far when it comes to landing Yoshinobu Yamamoto? But the point is, they're going to submit the highest offer. I would be shocked if they didn't. The question is, are they just the team that's going to drive up the bidding for another one that's going to ultimately land him? Is Yamamoto a huge Masahiro Tanaka fan and is dead set on following his path with the New York Yankees and is going to sign there, and they're just going to use the Mets for leverage? Possibly. We really don't know. But for any fan that's frustrated with the way these winter meetings have gone, or this offseason, or just the first 3 years or so of Steve Cohen's ownership of the Mets, I want you to ask yourself this question. When would the Wilpons have ever done what Steve Cohen did last week? When would Jeff Wilpon have hopped on a bird and flied all the way across the world to meet a free agent? A free agent that he's probably going to put a $300 million offer in front of, despite the fact that he's never thrown a pitch in the big leagues. The Mets are operating in a completely different way. And while this offseason has moved slowly, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Yamamoto is their guy. That's who they want. They looked at this free agent class, probably realized they weren't going to get Shohei Ohtani. And when the other options available are Cody Bellinger and Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery, and those last two are names the Mets could circle back on, Yamamoto was clearly the free agent that they saw at 25 years old after the success they just had with Kodai Senga this past season. And they thought, this is our guy. This is the guy that we invest all of our money into. This is the guy that we invest our time into when we're making our free agent pitches and trying to decide where we're going to go. So we'll see if this ultimately ends up with Yamamoto in a Mets uniform. But that is, clearly without any shadow of a doubt, their number one priority, their plan A. And, David Stearns was asked about it today, how their offseason plans change if they are able to sign him or if they aren't. And he said, there's obviously different avenues the Mets may choose to go depending on what happens with Yoshinobu Yamamoto. I believe if they sign Yamamoto, we're going to see a more aggressive team after that. If they can go into next season knowing that they have Senga and Yamamoto atop their rotation, they can feel pretty good about where their team can get to if they're able to make a playoff run. If you're imagining a playoff run with Senga and Eduardo Rodriguez, you might not be as aggressive at adding to some of the areas of your ball club to make sure that you get to the postseason. It might make it more of a transition year if you don't get Yamamoto and you have to settle for something less where, you want to be competitive. You want to put a team out there that gets fans into the ballpark. You hope you can be in the wild card race, but it's more a year where you're figuring out what you have in house, where you're looking at the top prospects you acquired at last year's deadline, seeing how they pan out in their first full season with the club, seeing how Jet Williams progresses, seeing how Ronnie Mauricio, Brett Beatty, Mark Vientos, Francisco Alvarez, how they continue to improve at the big league level. It might be more about all that stuff. But if you get Yoshinobu Yamamoto and you have two co-aces with Yamamoto and Senga that are capable of delivering when you get to October, that are capable of delivering throughout the season to get you there, maybe you are more aggressive at spending that extra dollar in the bullpen to maybe get that one more bat or to swing a trade that will change your lineup or another trade to bolster your rotation. I think it really is going to hinge on that one signing, and that's why we might not see all of the action for the Mets really take place until at the end of next week when that decision's made, and then the following week when they can start to round out their team potentially around a Yamamoto signing. But again, the lengths that they are going to get this guy, it's pretty exciting. So hopefully David Stearns, Steve Cohen, they can get the job done, and Yamamoto is a New York Met, because that would mean a successful offseason with that one signing alone. But in other news, the Rule 5 draft was today. They made a selection, and I was really excited about it, and then they traded their selection. I want to talk about everything that happened with the Rule 5 draft next. Before we get to that, though, today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. I know we come to sports for an escape from all the crazy realities of life, but can we talk for just a minute about preparing for tough situations? Whether you're on extended travel, if you're bracing for a major weather event, or you're limited by yet another supply shortage, you are covered when it comes to medication if you use Jace Medical. You want to be prepared, and thanks to our partners at Jace Medical, they can provide you with life-saving antibiotics and a long list of daily medications that can be ordered in a 1-year supply, even ED generics like Cialis or Viagra. Jace Medical has the Jace case, which is a pack of 5 different antibiotics that treats a long list of bacterial infections, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, amongst others. This stuff can happen to any of us. If you want to be prepared, visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It'll be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jacemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. So the Rule 5 draft was today. The Mets picked 7th technically because while they were 8th worst when it comes to the standings last year, the team has a full 40-man roster. They don't pick. The Mets made a selection, and I was really excited about it. Now, for those of you who aren't aware about what the Rule 5 draft is, basically this is an opportunity for teams to select a player that's not protected on another team's 40-man roster to basically, guard against teams prospect hugging. A team like the Tampa Bay Rays, they have a ton of top prospects and they have a crowded 40-man roster. So they're always trying to make sure that they protect their guys from the Rule 5 draft. And basically a player is eligible for the Rule 5 draft if they have been with the team for 5 years since signing, if they signed at 18 years or younger, or 4 years after signing if they're 19 or older. So, if a guy's drafted out of high school, it's 5 years, or if it's an international free agent, that was signed at 16, it's 5 years. That's why the Mets had to protect Alex Ramirez this past year to avoid another team maybe selecting him in the Rule 5 draft. So the Mets make a selection, and I'm thrilled about it. They get Justin Slayton, third-round pick back in 2019. He's 26 years old. He's a right-handed pitcher, throws really hard, can touch 98, averages 96.5 miles per hour on the fastball, really good sweeping slider, struck out over 36% of the batters he faced this past year, had a 2.87 ERA between AA and AAA. I'm thinking, all right, the Mets added a reliever that could be part of their bullpen. And I did even more prep than what I just gave you on this guy and why he was a great fit. And then come to find out, the Mets make a trade. We see trade with the Red Sox for left-handed reliever Ryan Ammons. That's the first thing we saw. Like, oh, cool. They just added somebody else. Nice. And we find out it's a Rule 5 trade. So the Mets selected Slayton for the Red Sox, who were picking further down in the draft. They get cash considerations and Ryan Ammons. Now, it's not all bad. While I would have preferred the Mets to stick with Slayton, put him in their bullpen, maybe they didn't want to make a selection in this Rule 5 draft. Maybe they didn't see Slayton or anyone else as a player worthy of a spot in their 40-man roster. Maybe there's a lot of transactions that they're planning to make throughout this offseason, and those 40-man roster spots are valuable to the Mets. They want to keep those 7 spots I believe they have left. I think they're 40-man sitting at 33. They want to keep them open because there's other major league signings to make. Well, they were able to take advantage of their opportunity to draft this guy, and they swing a trade, they get some cash back, and they get a prospect. And Ryan Ammons, that they don't have to stick on their major league roster. That's the thing about drafting someone in the MLB round of the Rule 5 draft. First, you pay $100,000 to select them, right? Then you have to keep them on your roster for the entire season. That's the active roster. If you hold on to him for the full year, it's now your player. You can option him to the minor leagues the following season. But for 2024, they would have had to kept Slayton on the roster all year. Now, if at any point you decide to option him, that player can be offered back to their original team for $50,000. So the Mets bypass all of that. They make the selection for the Red Sox. They trade him. Now the Red Sox are beholden to those Rule 5 rules, and the Mets get Ryan Ammons out of it. Now, Ammons, obviously you would imagine for a guy that has not pitched yet in the pros, he was drafted in the 10th round last year, has yet to make his pro debut. The Mets scouts probably really liked him. Or even Chris Gross with the Astros, the guy that just came over. He headed up the Astros amateur scouting previously. Now he's doing the same role with the Mets. Maybe he loved Ammons in the draft last year. So I'd imagine they value Ammons in some capacity, right? Maybe they make the selection. They look through the farm. They put some names out there that they'd be interested in, and that was the guy the Red Sox would want to part with. But the point is, they get a left-handed reliever who they probably value to some capacity, and they get him, as found money, really. And they get cash out of it too. So, I don't know exactly how that works. Like, I'd imagine the Mets had to pay the $100K to get Slayton. So maybe that cash that they're getting is just covering, that money they spent. So, the Red Sox are really paying for the pick. But regardless, the Mets just get a new prospect that they don't have to, put on an active roster, a 40-man roster, goes to the minor leagues, and we'll see what comes of it. So that was really the biggest thing that happened in the Rule 5 draft. The other thing is the Mets didn't lose anyone in the MLB phase. Okay, so for example, I was a little bit concerned about Jeremiah Jackson. I thought the Mets should have protected him and added him to the 40-man roster. He was a second-round pick by the Angels when Billy Epler was their GM. I think it was 2018. But regardless, he's the player they got in the Dominic Leone trade at the deadline. Jeremiah Jackson showed some pop with Binghamton this past year in AA. He has been able to play pretty much every position on the field. Has some real utility player hopes here, where I think he could be a piece for the Mets in the coming years. So that was a guy I was wondering if he gets selected. He did not. Joander Suarez was the pitching prospect in AA who had basically 2 no-hitters in a row. One was like a 6-inning no-hitter where he didn't finish the game. They pulled him at their 6 innings pitch. And then the following game, he goes 7 innings in a doubleheader, which in the minor leagues, those are 7-inning games, and completed a no-hitter. So he really thrived in AA, Joander Suarez did, and he was left unprotected. So good that those guys passed through. there is a minor league phase of the Rule 5 draft where the Mets did lose some guys. Essentially, these are players that other teams can take that aren't protected on a big league roster or on a triple A roster. So that means they're eligible to be pulled from basically the Binghamton roster. And the other team has to pay anywhere between $12,000 to $24,000 for those prospects. And it's not often that those transactions really hurt you. The Mets added a utility man in Donovan Estonia and a right-handed pitcher, Alan Perdomo. They lost Yariel Martinez, who is an outfielder, left-handed pitcher Tyler Thomas, right-handed pitcher Dyson Costa, right-handed pitcher Benito Garcia, and right-handed pitcher Brandon Hardy. So they did lose some arms in this. It's a shuffle of prospects, but the guys that usually go in the minor league phase, again, it's not too often that we hear about them. So I wouldn't lose too much sleep over that side of it. I'm happy that they were able to avoid anyone taking in the MLB phase of the Rule 5 draft. I would have loved it if we could be talking about a guy in Justin Slayton that we would see this next upcoming season. But there's every chance that Slayton, doesn't become some great reliever in the big leagues, and it won't matter. And again, if the Mets really weren't interested in him, and they had an opportunity to take him for another team and get a prospect out of it, why not, right? So that's really the overview of what happened at the Rule 5 draft. The Mets have continued to add to their bullpen in different ways, so I wouldn't be too concerned about losing Slayton because they've already signed a couple split contracts. They've signed guys to minor league deals. There's a lot of options already that have surfaced for the Mets bullpen once they get to spring training. And I have faith in David Stearns. Okay. I think this guy is one of the best executives in baseball. We're not going to see it fully, on display right now in the offseason. And who knows if in year one, the Mets are going to take the leap that it'll take for us to all appreciate what David Stearns does. But I believe that they are much better suited to identify talent with this current front office, to develop talent, and to hopefully be a sustainable winner moving forward. Now, though, we're all just waiting for the big news. What's going to happen with Yoshinobu Yamamoto? We'll talk about that on tomorrow's show. But since there are a lot of you watching on live, I'm going to take a quick break here, try to gather any questions you might have. So if you have any questions, fire them away in the comment section right now, and I'll answer those before we close. So we'll be back here in just a minute. All right, so I've had a chance to review some of the questions that we got here. I will show one on the screen talking about Juan Soto. Basically, if the Yankees do pull off this trade, which maybe they had since I've gone live, I'm not sure. Seems like he's going to be a Yankee. The question is he going to remain with the Yankees? Could the Mets still sign him next year? I think he's going to hit free agency. Depends on how the season goes. If the Yankees flop this year and it's just a terrible season, well, I think there's more of a chance he reaches free agency. I would have preferred it if Juan Soto got traded to like the Blue Jays, a team where it wouldn't be as clear if they'd be able to hang on to him long term. And the Yankees have a pretty good chance of keeping Juan Soto. But assuming their year goes bad and he hits the market, or even their year goes good and he hits the market, the Mets will have the opportunity to put a really competitive offer in front of them. And I imagine they will. I think the reason I'm not in the mix to trade for him is they just don't see themselves as a Juan Soto away from making a run this year. And honestly, they're kind of justified in that. So I think overall they're making the right call holding out of these trade talks, but at the same time, it's going to suck that he's going to be a Yankee this year, most likely. Another question we got here: how absurd was the Eric Fedde signing for 2 years, $15 million? It's a lot of money. Okay. I looked back at the Chris Flexen deal where the Mariners signed him out of the KBO. Obviously, Flexen was coming off a good year there, a low 3 ERA. It was not a KBO MVP, a KBO Triple Crown, and a KBO Cy Young like Eric Fedde, but he got like 2 years and $4.25 million. And then I think he became part of the arbitration system there in Seattle after that contract. So way less than what Fedde got. It is a lot of money. The White Sox, though, they are kind of in the point where they're just trying to fill a competent roster. They're taking a flyer on a guy that if he's great for them, they can flip him and get some prospects at the deadline with another year of control beyond that. I imagine the Mets maybe didn't want to get to that number. Remember, the first reported contract was like a 2-year, $10 million deal. And, then it escalated over the following 24 hours. So here we go. Would Ohtani to the Braves be the most soul-crushing in-division acquisition in recent memory for the Mets? Don't you guys remember they just got Jared Kelenic? No. Real talk. Yeah, that would suck if Shohei ended up with the Braves. I don't think that's going to happen, though. I think Alex Anthopoulos, their president, pretty much denied any interest in him lately. So I wouldn't worry too much about Ohtani ending up with the Braves. But then again, you never know. You never know. We got another one here. If they don't land Yamamoto, does it improve their chances? Improve the chances they decide to make a trade for a starter, or should we expect them to focus to stay on free agency? I totally bungled reading that. Sorry, guys. Anyway, as far as the trade market, the Mets don't want to trade for a rental. So I don't think that if they strike on Yamamoto, they're all of a sudden going to trade for Tyler Glasnow or Corbin Burns. Is there a pitcher that they can get multiple years of control on that would be, worth it to trade for? Possibly. I think they probably just stay with free agency. If Jordan Montgomery is waiting for Yamamoto to sign, to me, that might be an indication that whether it's the Mets, whether it's the Cubs, the Dodgers, there's other teams that are in the Yamamoto sweepstakes that might put the best offer in front of Montgomery. And so if they don't get Yamamoto, maybe the Mets get more aggressive on Jordan Montgomery or even a Blake Snell. Eduardo Rodriguez seems like he might be signed tomorrow. I think that's one guy that they're probably out on. And other than that, I mean, they might just put together a rotation that's a lot of middle of the rotation arms with Kodai Senga. And that does not mean that they can't succeed with a team like that. It just means that their ceiling is certainly nowhere near as high. One last question we'll look at here. Are the Yankees getting Soto and Yamamoto? It'd be frustrating, right? Because that was the dream for the Mets offseason. The Yankees pull that off. Frustrating to see what you hoped would happen for the Mets take place across town. I don't think they get both. I think the Mets are getting Yoshinobu Yamamoto. So that's where I stand with it. But there's a lot of dominoes that have to fall here. If the Dodgers don't get Ohtani, does that make them the team that gets Yamamoto? I think that's also in the cards. I think that there is a chance, certainly, that they pull both of them off. But I'm really, optimistic right now that the Mets are going to be able to get the job done on Yamamoto because I think they're going to put a ridiculous contract in front of them. I'm starting to think the Mets are going to go to 10 years. And if they get north of $30 million a year, for one, you have to remember you add on the posting fee on top of it. So that's probably an additional $50 million. If all of a sudden they're paying this guy like $315 million plus a posting fee on top of it, they might be the only team that can get to that number. And if that's the case, that's where you land him. Anyway, that's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. We'll have another show that'll post for tomorrow, assuming that there's news I might get on live before that. But if the Mets don't do anything major tonight, I'll break it all down for tomorrow morning show. And we'll just keep things rolling throughout the offseason here. Appreciate all of you who tuned in live. And make sure that you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe on YouTube. Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. If you want to be part of our Locked On Mets Insiders, you can find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. And now, if you want to check out some great other streaming content on YouTube, you can find the Locked On Sports Today show with your 24/7 coverage of everything going on in the sports world with local experts and league-wide experts covering all the latest news. So check that out as well.